Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight. This week, we will dedicate our In Focus conversations to the various elements of growth in Utah. We've talked about agriculture, and we'll address air quality, drought, and housing next. But tonight, our focus is on transportation. Kicking off our conversation is Cody Lutz, Planning Project Manager for Envision Utah. Cody, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, Rosie.
Cody, I'd like to start the conversation with having you help us understand the projected growth in Utah. What is our population right now, and where is it anticipated to be in 2050?
Yeah, so most people probably weren't excitedly awaiting the 2020 census results like I was, but you may have seen that Utah is officially the fastest growing state in the U.S. We grew by about 18% between 2010 and 2020. We now have about 3.3 million people. And our demographers expect that we'll continue to add about 500,000 people each decade to bring us to about 5 million people in 2050.
Okay, that's nearly double. How much does the average Utah family spend on transportation, and how can that pose a challenge financially?
Yeah, so most Utahns spend about 30% of a third of their income on transportation. If you think about it, the annual cost to own and operate a car averages out to be about $10,000 per vehicle. So if you as a family have a couple of cars, that's a pretty big chunk of your budget. And for lower income families, even just having one car, $10,000, that's $10,000 that you're not spending on food, not spending on housing. So it can be significant.
Yeah, when you think about it, sometimes a vehicle can essentially be having another child, pumping gas, insurance, repairs, maintenance, and all that stuff. So it really can add up when you think about it. How do Utahns view transportation? Are we mostly car owners?
Yeah, so when we ask Utahns about their vision for transportation, they tell us that they want it to be convenient to get around, they want to be able to choose how to get around, and they also want to live close to where they work, to grocery stores, to school, things like that. So traditionally in the past and currently, driving is often the easiest way to get around. That's because of kind of the spread out way that we've grown and what a good job we've been doing in creating roadways and maintaining roadways. We did, when we were working on the Your Utah, Your Future vision a few years ago, we surveyed 50,000 Utahns, and we did hear that making it easier to get around without a car was the #1 priority. So I think things are starting to head in that direction.
So with that being said, Cody, how does that affect our transportation needs? Is pouring money into roads the way to go?
So we definitely still need to maintain and improve our roadway systems. But you can get into a situation of kind of diminishing returns if you think about things like adding new lanes to I-15. Once you get up into the 7 and 8 lanes, region, it can take so much time to merge that you're not really moving more people more quickly to work or wherever they're going. And it does also become very expensive at that point. So I do think it's time that we start to kind of shift our focus towards getting around in other ways. So that takes investing in infrastructure, adding new bus lines, new bike lanes, sidewalks, things like that. And the other part of that equation is thinking about how we organize our communities. So basically bringing our homes and the destinations that we go to every day a little bit closer together so that our trips are shorter and it's easy to use those other modes of transportation.
I want to sneak in a question really quick about electric vehicles. How does the auto industry's shift to electric vehicles affect the way we think about transportation?
Yeah, so electric vehicles are pretty awesome. They're really good for our air quality. The main thing that we need to think about in terms of helping them be adopted more is to add charging stations. Other than that, they don't really change how people get along or how people get around or how we think about infrastructure as much. Once you start to combine them with things like autonomous vehicles and rideshare systems, then it becomes easier. You know, is it more convenient to get a driverless Uber than it is to own your own car? Then it starts to shift things up a little bit more.
Cody, let's talk about solutions. What are some of the solutions we can start pursuing to alleviate the impact of growth on our transportation? I'm thinking, is it public transportation? Is it remote working?
Yeah, so we had a really awesome kind of natural experiment over the pandemic of a lot of people all of a sudden were working from home. And we found a couple of interesting things. The air quality did get a little bit better, and then I think a lot of employers were pleasantly surprised about how productive people were when working from home. So I think that's a big part of it, and I think moving forward people will continue to work from home at least part of the time if they can. And that might mean that some of the support businesses that are normally downtown or in business parks might be moving more towards the suburbs, things like cafes, coffee shops, things like that. So you might be seeing some of these little activity centers popping up.
If there was any silver lining from the pandemic, it gave us really a real-time vision of how we could take advantage of that option of working from home and really improve our air quality. All right, you've been hearing from Cody Lutz, Planning Project Manager for Envision Utah. Cody, thank you for your insight tonight and for joining us on the show.
Hey, thanks, Rosie. Great to be here.
We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on growth in Utah, transportation. Up next in our conversation is Ralph Becker, former mayor of Salt Lake City. And Ralph, thank you so much for being here tonight and joining our discussion.
Great to be with you, Rosie. Thank you.
Ralph, let's begin our conversation with talking about how transportation ties to community development and goals for reducing air pollution and our carbon footprint.
Yeah, so when we look at our transportation system, as Cody was mentioning, we really tend to focus on our personal experiences, and we like the independence of having a car. We'd like to have less commute time, less time probably in our car, but we're really a very auto-oriented society. But if we think in terms of the big picture of air pollution, dealing with climate change, having livable communities and sustainable communities over the long term, we know from looking at other big cities that have expanded so quickly that if we don't move away from just relying on car and highways, we're going to have enormous congestion, increased pollution, and a greater carbon footprint going forward. So to be able to address, I think, what we face and being able to provide the convenience and livable conditions that we need and want, we also have to make adjustments in the way our community develops and in the way we provide for transportation to give people the options and the convenience they're looking for and still accomplish the great communities that we want to live in.
I think you make a great point, and if you go to certain big cities like Chicago or Seattle, sometimes it's faster to take public transportation than getting in your car and being stuck in traffic. So Ralph, how can traffic congestion be reduced through transportation investment and decisions with the growth Utah faces?
Well, I think the most important thing is to give people good options for ways to get around, and also make the experience of living closer together more desirable for more people. So downtown Salt Lake, which is exploding in growth, people don't realize that Salt Lake City has grown actually in population as much or more than almost any other place in this state. We've been growing at 3,000 units a year for the past several years. And that means that a lot of people are moving into downtown, and then we need to provide the range of experiences and the range of sort of qualities that people are looking for. And that means park space. That means convenience of being able to shop and get your groceries. It means convenience of being able to get to work and having the combination of things that we want in a community, including schools downtown or schools in our more dense areas, to make sure that we're providing the range of sort of qualities that people are looking for. And when that happens, it then feeds more the sort of other modes of transportations, the last mile, as transportation experts talk about, whether that's making biking easier, whether that's providing for transit or providing for various ways, walking to be able to get around really comfortably and make it easier for people not to have to sit in traffic congestion for 20, 30 minutes or more every single day to be able to have a good livable environment that they live in and work in and play in.
And as we're talking about growth in Utah, we are hearing more of that terminology, developing communities where people can work, live, and play all in the same area. Ralph, how does transit use affect community development to optimize strong community cohesion?
Well, transit is a key part of our transportation system. We're very fortunate in Utah that we have seen an enormous commitment to transit. I was just this morning visiting with a former mayor of Charlotte who was in town, and they've worked for 20 years and gotten 24 miles of rail. And she said, "You guys seem to have so much. What do you have?" We have 140 miles of rail. So we've built a backbone of a system with rail that allows people to move conveniently, quickly, and comfortably, and not have to deal with traffic congestion. Now the challenge for us and the opportunity for us is to keep building that system out. So transit is a key component, and it has to be relatively convenient so that it can compete with an automobile and we don't just grow into more and more traffic congestion. But we're pretty fortunate in Utah, and I think we've seen some wise leadership in the state and work with organizations like that Cody is part of, Envision Utah, to build an understanding and support within the public and within community leadership to keep expanding transit. But there's much to be done around transit.
Now, Ralph, if we want healthy, attractive communities and lifestyles, what changes in transportation investment will be necessary?
Well, it's to do the kind of work that we've seen, and I think investing even more in giving people really convenient, comfortable, easy choices. I live in downtown now. I go for a week without even getting in my car because I've got shopping, I've got access to recreation that I want, I have the ability to go to work without ever getting in my car. And I think making that sort of experience and improving on that experience, we're seeing young people in enormous numbers move into downtown areas like Salt Lake City because there is the combination of factors that make for a comfortable, convenient lifestyle. And then you need the support system. So having the bike share program that we have, the Green Bike program, makes it really easy to get around. The scooters make it easy for people to get around. Having a good bus and rail system that's circulating through downtown make it easy for people to get around. And it keeps from just clogging up our streets and contributing to the air quality problems we have, and not having a very sustainable or livable community in our downtown areas. So we've been lucky, but we need to continue to make and probably even grow the kind of investments we make so that there's a full, enjoyable lifestyle for people to live in downtown areas and in areas where there are more people living closer together. And that includes investing in park space, that includes investing in trails, includes investing in the connections among the communities. And we've done pretty well, but there's, as I mentioned, there's a lot more
to be
that needs to be done.
All right, you've been hearing from Ralph Becker, former mayor of Salt Lake City. And Ralph, thank you so much for being here tonight. We appreciate your insight.
Appreciate being with you. Thank you, Rosie.
We'll be right back. Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on growth in Utah transportation. Rounding out our conversation tonight is Andrew Gruber, Executive Director for the Wasatch Front Regional Council. And Andrew, thank you so much for being here tonight and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rosie.
Andrew, can you tell us about the Wasatch Front Regional Council? Which agencies are a part of it and what does the council do?
Well, the Wasatch Front Regional Council is a public agency that brings together people from all over our region, cities and counties, UDOT and UTA, community organizations and business groups to plan for the future. Rosie, as you talked about with Cody, we're the fastest growing state in the nation. We have great quality of life in Utah, but with that growth, we can't take it for granted. So we put plans together to make sure that for generations to come, we continue to have great quality of life.
So it sounds like the council brings all the stakeholders to the table to plan for the future together.
That's right.
Now, Andrew, what kinds of plans has the council implemented?
Well, the primary plan, Rosie, is what we call the Wasatch Choice Vision. And it's a vision for where we want to be 10, 20, even 30 years from now, so our children and grandchildren still have a great place to live. And it looks at 4 elements: transportation that you've been talking about, housing, so where people are living and their housing choices, open space, so that we have our beautiful mountains, but also parks and green space and trails woven into the fabric of our communities, and then jobs and businesses, and then how all of those elements relate together.
We really do need to think about all 4 of those elements because they intertwine and they all impact each other.
That's right.
How does the council think about transportation? Is it about infrastructure, and how does the council center its approach?
Well, it's interesting, Rosie, because transportation is about the infrastructure itself, but it's just as much about our land use. What I mean by that is, for having transportation, of course, we need to invest in and have a really good road system, state roads and local roads. We need to have a really good transit system, so the front runner and the tracks and the bus. We need to have trails that people can ride their bikes on and sidewalks that they can walk on. But at the same time, we also have to think about our land use, where people live, where their homes are, and how it relates to transportation. So if you live on the west side of Salt Lake County and you have to drive across Salt Lake County and get stuck in traffic, then you need a better road system and better transit. But if we put jobs on the west side of Salt Lake County, then people can live and work closer together. And that's a solution for transportation as well.
That really is key. Now, as you said, Utah is growing faster than any other state in the nation. Where do we succeed in transportation, and where do we need to do some work?
Well, I think that in Utah, we have what we call a special sauce of collaboration. So many people love Utah so much, whether you're from here originally, whether you moved here from somewhere else. And so we collaborate and we plan for the future, for future generations. And that's so important, given that we're growing so fast. I think one of the challenges that we really face right now is our housing and our transportation costs. We've got so much pressure on our personal incomes and just being able to afford to live here. So we really have to get the costs under control in both housing and transportation, and think about how we can use technology and innovation to make improvements in our transportation system as well.
Our last 2 guests talked about how Utah, like many places in the West, is very car-centric. People almost rely on cars entirely. What are the challenges around that concept, and do you think Utah can stay a car-centric state?
You know, Rosie, most people drive to get to most places now, and that's going to continue in the future. So we need to have a good, safe, well-functioning road system. But we've got to provide choices to people as well. We can't build enough new roads to accommodate the demand that's coming. So if somebody lives, let's say, in Ogden, and they work downtown, or they want to go to the Jazz game downtown, we should provide an option for them to jump on the front runner and take that downtown. So if that works for them, then that's terrific. And then that means there's one less car on the road for the people who are choosing to drive, and it also helps with our air quality. So we really have to be focusing on providing choices and options for people in how they get around.
Andrew, we've got about a minute left. What does the future of transportation look like for Utah? What can we expect?
Oh, well, you know, the pace of change in technology is so rapid. Telecommuting that we've talked about is a solution for some of our travel demand challenges. E-commerce, the way we shop is changing. Electric vehicles, in a really helpful way, are changing and making our transportation system cleaner and better. But you know, the technology, that's not what's really important to people. What people want for transportation is to be able to get to and easily get to the things that are important. Can you get to school? Can you get to work? Can you get home easily and not be stuck in traffic so that you can be home for dinner or be to your kid's soccer game? So we've got to provide choices to people. We've got to think about where people live and where they work and the transportation system. And we've all got to work together as the fastest growing state in the nation.
You've been hearing from Andrew Gruber, Executive Director for the Wasatch Front Regional Council. And Andrew, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation
Thanks
tonight.
so much, Rosie.
We'll be right back.